I wasn't planning to go to Claire's wedding. Seeing her in a white dress smiling happily beside another man, I just wanted to look away, but then I saw her. A stranger, her brown skin glowing under the wedding lights. She sat alone, her gaze calm, quietly observing everything. I didn't know why, but I walked over. I reached out and asked, "Would you like to dance?" She smiled. Not timidly, not guarded. "Only if you're willing to hear the truth." I didn't understand, but I still danced with her, and in those short 3 minutes on the dance floor, I learned the truth about Claire, and about myself that I had never dared to face with their eyes. One dance, one secret, one night that changed everything. I received Claire's wedding invitation on a rainy afternoon, her name embossed next to a man named Gregory. I read it at least 10 times, but still couldn't understand why I was invited. We broke up quietly, no betrayal, just one day she looked at me and said, "We're not the same as we used to be." It took me months to accept that. And now she was getting married, and I was still standing still, invitation in hand with 1,000 unanswered questions. I planned to decline. I even drafted a reason, work, family, busy, but I didn't send it. Because I needed something Claire never gave me. Closure. A clear ending, even if it hurt. I told Trey, my best friend. He listened, went quiet for a few seconds, then said bluntly, "You're setting yourself up for pain, Malik. No sane man goes to his ex's wedding." I didn't argue, because he was right, but there was something I didn't say. I wasn't going to see Claire. I was going because I needed to know if I'd truly let go. The wedding was held in the suburbs, in a fancy garden filled with golden lights and white flowers. I arrived late, quietly sat in the back row. No one noticed. No one recognized me. Only I watched Claire walk down the aisle, hand in hand with Gregory, her face glowing like she'd never known me. I thought I was ready, but then her eyes swept past me, and I knew I was wrong. The reception was in a grand hall, soft music playing, guests clinking glasses cheerfully. I found a spot near the bar, ordered my second whiskey just to keep my hands busy. I thought I could hide in the crowd, but Claire saw me. She paused. Her eyes widened for a split second, then quickly regained composure. Gregory didn't notice anything odd. He smiled and shook my hand like I was just an old classmate. Claire said softly, "Didn't expect you to come." I replied, "Didn't expect you to invite me." We stood there, exchanged a few words about work, the weather, then fell silent. Claire led Gregory away. I remained, whiskey number 3 in hand, and an unfamiliar sense of loneliness. And then I saw her. She sat alone at a table near the dance floor. In a room full of pastels and the soft lights, she stood out in a wine-red dress, elegant yet quiet. Her brown skin shimmered under the golden light, soft curls framing her serene face. No heavy makeup, no attempt to draw attention, yet something about her made it impossible to look away. She wasn't smiling, wasn't talking to anyone. Just sitting, observing, as if everything was unfolding in a world she didn't quite belong to. Our eyes met. I should have looked away, but she didn't. That gaze, not to take us away, not cold, not curious, but something deeper, like it was seeing right through me. I didn't know who she was, but I stood up and walked toward her. I'd never done this at a wedding. I didn't know why I did it that night. I approached her table, leaned slightly. "I'm not great at small talk, but would you like to dance?" She looked at me surprised. Then her lips curved into a small smile. Not polite, not shy, but real. "I don't usually say yes to strangers," she said. "But tonight might be an exception." Her hand rested in mine, light yet steady. We stepped onto the dance floor, surrounded by a crowd swaying to an old tune. I don't remember what song it was. I only remember the scent of her hair, faint like jasmine, and the way her hand felt warm yet distant. A complete stranger. And something inside me began to shift. We swayed gently to the music. I felt strange, like I was in a dream with no script. She broke the silence first. "Do you know the bride and groom?" I smiled awkwardly. "Claire and I used to date 2 years, college." She tilted her head, eyes slightly raised. "And you chose to come to your ex's wedding?" "I'm good at hurting myself," I said half-jokingly. "What about you?" She paused a beat. "Call me Renee. I also know Claire. In my own way." I looked at her more closely. Something in her voice, her eyes, even how her smile, as I felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. "I'm sure we've met before," I said. Renee just smiled softly. "Maybe, but not like this." We kept swaying gently. Neither of us said anything for a few minutes. Yet strangely, the silence didn't feel awkward. I felt safe, no need to pretend to be cheerful, no need to fake that I'd moved on. What do you do? Renee asked. Environmental engineer. I treat wastewater. Not the most romantic job. She nodded. The world needs clean water more than love poems. I laughed. And you? Civil rights lawyer. I fight for those who don't have a voice in the system. There was something in the way she spoke about her work that told me she wasn't just smart. She'd been through dark places. You're still wondering, she said, looking at me, if we've met before? I didn't deny it, because it felt true. Maybe, Renee said. But if you have met me, I probably wasn't someone you'd remember clearly. I stayed quiet, something in her voice, not angry, but like she'd moved beyond it. We danced a few more turns. The song was nearing its end. I felt a pang of regret. How well do you think you knew Claire? She asked, eyes never leaving mine. I froze. Back then I thought, everything. And now? I exhaled. Now I'm not sure I ever really knew her. Renee nodded slowly. Sometimes people don't change. We just never looked close enough. The lights in the hall changed color. The music shifted. But we hadn't left the dance floor. When the music ended, she didn't let go. Not clinging, just a natural rhythm, not ready to end. Need some air? Renee asked, tilting her head toward the terrace doors. I nodded. We stepped outside, leaving the music and laughter behind the glass doors. The night air was cool. Strings of golden lights hung across the garden, twinkling like stars fallen to earth. We leaned against the stone railing, quietly watching the party from afar, like two people outside the world. You're not surprised I know Claire? Renee asked. Actually, I am, I replied. But I think I'm getting used to surprises. She smiled softly. Not yet, Malik. The real surprises haven't even begun. I looked at Renee under the soft yellow light of the terrace. She leaned slightly against the railing, her eyes facing the direction of the music, but I knew her mind was somewhere else. I once asked Claire about high school, I said. She only told me she was a cheerleader, smart, well-loved. Renee gave a faint smile, not the kind born of joy. Yeah, Claire was very good at creating the best version of herself. I turned to her. And you and Claire were friends? Renee shook her head. No, never friends. She didn't befriend people like me. Why not? Renee didn't answer right away. She spoke slowly, almost in a whisper. Because I was part of a past Claire always wanted to bury. I stood still. That answer, that wasn't light at all. I didn't know how to respond. Renee's words suddenly felt like a cut. No blood, but painful. I used to be the girl sitting at the back of the class, she said, still staring out into the distant garden. Quiet, smart, invisible, I didn't belong to Claire's world. I looked at her. Her eyes no longer held anger or sadness. Only one thing remained. Survival. Claire never did anything directly, Renee continued. She didn't need to. One nod, and her group knew exactly what to do. I gripped my glass tighter. And what did they do? She turned to me, eyes meeting mine. They broke someone, without touching, just with enough cruelty and enough silence. That was when I began to understand Renee wasn't just a guest. She carried something Claire could never run from forever. I used to have a different name, Renee said, her voice even but lower. That name, no one here remembers anymore. Claire surely doesn't. I looked at her, waiting. Back then, my name was Alana Thomas. That name belonged to a girl who was trampled, mocked, turned into a joke in front of the whole auditorium. I swallowed hard. She didn't need to describe it. The way she spoke was enough. I didn't change my name to hide. I changed it to survive. A breeze passed through. Renee pulled her shawl closer. And you, Malik, what were you looking for when you came here? It took me a few seconds to answer. Closure, I guess? She nodded. As for me, I came to begin again. And I knew. Two strangers on that terrace had just stepped into each other's story. The old name disappeared on paper, Renee said slowly, but it never disappeared from memory. I said nothing. Some things don't need a reply, only to be heard. Senior prom, she continued. I wore a dress my mother had made, paid for with every dollar from her part-time job. I thought maybe things had changed, that I'd be seen as a person. Her voice wasn't bitter, not trembling, only the fatigue of someone who'd been broken and had to pick up the pieces alone. Claire and her friends planned it all. They made me believe someone liked me, sent messages, flirted, called me special. She turned to me, eyes unblinking. They didn't have to insult me. They just had to give me hope. And then they crushed it in front of everyone, in front of Tina. That night, Renee said, I went to prom with a trembling but hopeful heart. The whole school was there. Loud music, dim lights. I thought maybe. This was my moment to step out of the invisible shadow I had lived in for years. She lifted her head, eyes focused on a distant memory. They waited for the perfect moment. As I walked in, the lights went out. A big screen lit up. I saw her fingers tighten slightly, her voice still eerily calm. Every message I sent that boy, every word I thought was sincere, was projected line by line. Laughter, whistles, someone shouted, "Oh, best prank of the year!" Renee closed her eyes. I stood there in the most beautiful dress I'd ever worn, and realized I was nothing more than a joke to a group of people. I was speechless. She didn't need to say more. I could see it all, more clearly than words alone could show. Note: a slight pause after the climax in Part 15, Part 15, highlighting the emptiness left behind, for the emotion to truly settle in. When the lights came back on, Renee said, no one looked me in the eye. They turned away, or kept laughing, or whispered to one another. I imagined the scene. A girl in her finest dress, standing in a room full of music and lights, yet frozen in airless cold. I didn't cry, didn't run, she continued. I just stood there. 1 minute, 2, not knowing what to do. Claire looked at me, then turned away, as if I'd never existed. Her voice was steady, but beneath it was a thin layer of ash that had never blown away. I went home, took off the dress, and felt like I had never been a person. That night I disappeared, and no one noticed, no one called, and no one apologized, not a single one. Note: smoothly continues from Part 16, deepening the long-term consequences, from scholarships to silence. The next day, Renee said, I woke up feeling completely hollow. Like I was no longer myself, no longer the smart student, no longer the good daughter, no longer anything. I stayed silent. She looked out at the garden where wedding music still echoed faintly from what felt like another world. My grades dropped. My scholarship was revoked. My parents didn't ask much. They just tried to scrape together enough for me to attend a local community college. Old friends never texted. No explanations. No one stood up for me. Renee clutched her shawl slightly tighter. It wasn't because I was weak, but because they made me believe I deserved it. I didn't just lose one night. She turned to me, speaking slowly. I lost the future I once believed I had. Note: shifts from consequence to healing, planting the first seed of hope in a soft yet deep transition. I survived, Renee said, but not the kind of survival people call okay. I went to school, worked part-time, came home, repeating like a shadow, no emotions, no dreams, no trust. I looked at her. Her story didn't need drama. It was heavy with truth. Then one day I saw Claire's name in the newspaper. She had won a prestigious scholarship, praised as a model of resilience, an inspiration. She smiled faintly. Not bitter, just tired. They honored her as a symbol, and I was still paying off student loans. But maybe that was when I realized I couldn't let her hold power over me anymore. I didn't come back to get revenge. She lifted her gaze, eyes brighter than ever before. I came back to reclaim my voice. Note: guides the emotion into a stage of confrontation and transformation through clear, visual, and firm inner resolve. I used to think, Renee said, that the only way to forget was to never look back. But the more I avoided it, the larger the past became, like a shapeless shadow that just kept swallowing everything. She looked inside the ballroom where Claire was smiling at someone. I needed to look her in the eye, not to blame her, but to remind myself, I survived. I rebuilt my life, not because someone saved me, but because I stood up on my own. I felt a chill down my spine, not from the breeze, but from the convictions in her voice. A quiet kind of strength, powerful without needing to shout. And you know what? Renee said, her eyes never leaving Claire. This is the first time I've seen her look small. Note, heightened emotional tension with a distant face-off. An unspoken dialogue full of reckoning. I turned to look at Claire. She was laughing with someone, looking confident, successful, just as everyone knew her. But then her eyes glanced toward us. Just for a second. She stopped. That look lasted no more than 3 seconds, but in those 3 seconds I saw all the masks she'd ever worn tremble. Claire wasn't smiling anymore. No frown, no turning away, just standing there, looking at Renee. And Renee didn't flinch. She met the gaze head on, steady, not expecting an apology, not needing acknowledgement. In the noisy crowd, no one noticed that those two women had just shared a silent reckoning. Then Claire turned away. Renee looked at me and said softly, "That's enough. I don't need anything else." And I realized sometimes silence is the loudest victory. Note, gently ease the emotion after the visual climax, returning to the connection between the two main characters, laying the foundation for empathy. The wedding carried on as if nothing had happened. The music shifted to a slow jazz tune. People laughed, clinked glasses, took pictures. The world kept turning like usual. But to me, everything slowed down. Renee stood beside me, silent, not forcing strength, not pretending to be brave. She just existed in the right place at the right time, like someone who had walked through the storm. "Thank you," I said, unsure for what. For sharing, for facing it, for letting me hear it. She smiled gently. "No need to thank me. I didn't share to be pitied. I shared because you looked at me without turning away." An instrumental track played from inside. We stood there, saying nothing more, and I understood. Some things run deepest without needing words. Note, deepens the theme of identity and agency, continuing the tone of recovery with an introspective voice. "I used to hate the name Alana," Renee said, her voice barely a breeze. Not because it was ugly, but because it reminded me of the girl who was mocked, who was pushed out of her own life. I watched her, saying nothing. Then I chose the name Renee. In French, it means reborn. She smiled, a smile no longer carrying weight. Renaming myself was how I reclaimed control. I'm no longer who they broke. I nodded slowly. But I think Alana didn't disappear. She still lives in Renee, as the bravest part. Renee paused a beat. Her eyes softened, deeper. I'll remember. We looked at each other. Not like strangers who just met, but as if we'd known each other in a forgotten life. Note, builds connection, shifting from solitude to closeness, forming a we instead of you and I. "I used to think," Renee said, "this day was mine, a face-off, a private ending." She looked at me, her gaze gentler after all the walls had come down. "But then I saw you, someone also carrying something unresolved." I nodded lightly. "You came thinking you could see Claire one last time, then move on." "And now?" I exhaled. "Now, I'm not sure I ever really knew who she was." Renee chuckled softly. "Welcome." A quiet moment passed, like a breath held. Then she said, "I used to think healing was a solo task, but today I realized sometimes to close a chapter we need someone beside us to witness it," I whispered, "and I'm more than willing to be that someone." Note, continue the emotional tone from the previous scene, and close this part with a quiet connection that hints at a gentle beginning. I watched the warm light fall across her face, bringing out the stillness in her eyes, still but shaped by all she had lived through. "Are you afraid?" Renee asked. "Starting over after everything's broken?" I answered honestly. "I'm not afraid to begin. I'm afraid to repeat." She was quiet for a few seconds, then nodded. "So am I. But I think this time we're starting with truth, not illusion." A soft breeze passed between us, carrying the scent of damp grass and faint flowers from the garden behind the reception. I turned to her, my voice barely above a whisper. "If I asked you to dance again, this time not for anyone else, just for us, would you say yes?" Renee smiled. "Only if you're not dancing to old memories." "I promise," I said. "This time I'll move to the real rhythm." Note, a warm, emotional rhythm. A healing moment through a simple act, opening the door to real connection. We returned to the reception hall. The music had shifted to a slow love song. No one noticed the two people stepping onto the floor. Not grand, not dramatic. I held out my hand. Renee looked at me for a beat, then placed her hand in mine. We started dancing. Not like people trying to be seen, but like two people daring to believe in something again. No one watched. But to me, it was the most real moment of the night. No Claire, no Gregory, no past. Just me and Renee. Two people once shattered, now moving softly with the music as if nothing had ever broken. I looked into her eyes, not searching for anything, just staying in this moment. Note: keeps a gentle pace, capturing emotional depth as the characters truly begin to see each other beyond the past. The music continued, tender as if shielding us from the rest of the room. Renee's hand in mine, not cold, not shaking, just warm and real. "I forgot this feeling," she whispered. "Not of love, but of simply existing without being judged." I nodded, understanding more than words could say. "You know," she continued, "all evening I had prepared bitter words, sharp lines for Claire, but then I didn't need them. Because I no longer wanted revenge. I just wanted freedom." I gently squeezed her hand. "And I just want to be with someone who knows who they are and still chooses to hold my hand." Renee looked at me. No smile, no reply, just kept her hand in mine, as if to say yes without needing sound. Note: maintains emotional depth, building a foundation for a new relationship through understanding, not thrill. When the song ended, we didn't leave the floor right away. Not out of shyness, not to be seen, just neither of us was ready to return to the old world. "What do you think that this is?" Renee asked. I knew she wasn't talking about the dance. She meant us. The thing forming between two strangers, not fast, but real. I thought for a moment. "I think, it's not a cinematic beginning, but it's real." She nodded. "Real is enough." We stepped off the floor, neither rushing nor clinging. No promises, no labels, just two people walking in the same direction. No need to run, no need to hurry, just moving together. And for the first time in a long time, my heart didn't feel heavy. Note: deepens their bond, showing small, honest steps in the connection between two wounded people. After the dance, we found an empty table in the far KR corner. Renee poured herself a glass of water, no alcohol. I followed. "Do you always avoid drinking?" she asked, tilting her head. "Tonight I do," I smiled. "I want to remember everything." She nodded gently, a soft curve to her lips. We began talking about seemingly small things. Favorite childhood meals, the first book that made us cry, songs we listened to when we couldn't sleep. No need to be interesting, no need to impress, just two people sharing things no one else had ever asked. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed this freely. Maybe this is how something begins. Not with fireworks, not with declarations, just the right person at the right time. Note: slows the mood slightly, going deeper into the silence where connection forms without words. There were moments in between stories when we said nothing. Just sat there, hands grazing chair edges, eyes drifting to the garden, letting silence speak its part. I used to fear silence. It made me feel alone, like talking to empty space. But tonight I didn't fear it. Renee didn't fill the silence with jokes or clever lines. She just was there, as if silence had its own worth. "Why did you really come here?" she asked after a while. I answered slowly, "Because I thought I needed to see Claire one last time." Renee nodded. "And now?" I looked into her eyes. "Now, I just want to know more about the person sitting next to me." Note: affirms the emotional shift, not driven by absence, but by clarity of who's present. Renee looked at me. No smile, no flinch. "Are you sure you've let Claire go?" That question didn't offend me. It made me face myself. "I think I loved a version of her I made up," I said. "And it took me a long time to accept I didn't love who she really was, just who I imagined she was." She nodded softly. "That's the first step to starting again." I smiled, light this time, not forced. "And the next step?" Renee tilted her head. "Is choosing to look forward, with someone who doesn't change herself to meet expectations." The night breeze passed, gentle and real. I didn't need to think long. I just knew I wanted that someone to be her, and for the first time I knew I said it not to fill a void, but to truly choose someone who stays. Note: reintroduce internal conflict and build quiet tension. creating an atmosphere where everyone sees but no one understands amid the ongoing wedding. The wedding buzzed on as if nothing had happened. Claire stood at the center of her circle of friends, radiant in her white dress, her smile as perfect as everything else in her life. I looked at her and saw what I had always overlooked. The slight tension at the corners of her mouth, the way her eyes flicked quicker when Renee and I passed by. Everyone saw Claire. But no one really looked at her. No one knew the past she left behind. No one knew the girl who once stood there, Alana, had returned under a new name. Renee said nothing. She just stood beside me, spine straight, gaze steady, as if, for the first time, she had no need to dodge anyone's eyes. And I knew Claire might fool everyone else, but today she couldn't fool us. No, raise emotional tension. Claire begins to falter, but it clings to her facade. Claire caught Renee's gaze again. No confidence in it this time. Just a slow, long blink, as if weighing whether to keep pretending or look away. Renee didn't flinch. She looked straight at her. No blame, no challenge. Just the gaze of someone who has survived and no longer needs an apology. Claire paused. I saw her grip her wine glass tighter. Her eyes darted away quickly, back to the crowd, the forced smile returning. No one at the party noticed. They still raised glasses, shared pleasantries, lived in the narrative Claire had created. Only we, standing outside that stage, knew. She was trembling, and the scariest thing for someone who once caused pain isn't rage, it's silence, from the one who forgave but never forgot. Note, affirm Renee's emotional stance. Deep in the message, confrontation isn't retaliation, it's release. I imagined this moment 100 times, Renee said softly. Claire standing before me, no longer head held high, no longer hidden behind reputation and spotlight. I used to think I'd say something sharp, something cutting. I looked at her. And now? She shook her head, eyes still on Claire from a distance. I don't need to. I didn't come to make her feel guilty. I came so I no longer carry her in every decision, every dream, every glance in the mirror. Today isn't Claire's ending. She turned to me, gaze calm. It's my beginning, for the first time. I'm walking forward without looking back. And I understood. This wasn't forgiveness, it was freedom, the choice to stop carrying the pain. Note, ease the rhythm. Shift from the weight of confrontation to the gentle presence between Malik and Renee, reaffirming their real connection. Renee sat on the stone steps by the garden, her hands clasped, eyes looking up into the canopy as if hearing old stories. One last time. I sat beside her, saying nothing. No words were needed to guide the moment. Just being there was enough. I once thought I'd never step into a party again, she said softly. I feared the stares, the laughter, even dressing up. But tonight I wore this dress not to be seen, she continued, just to remind myself I deserve to be here. I gently placed my hand over hers, a very light touch, but she didn't pull away. It wasn't a loud beginning. But to me it was the way someone chooses to stay. Note, deepen the emotional bond, moving from empathy to shared emotional space, filling emptiness with truth. What did you hold on to after the breakup? Renee asked. Her voice calm as a breeze. I paused for a few seconds, then answered. Photos? An old notebook? A song I couldn't delete from my playlist? She nodded softly. I held on to an apology, never spoken, waited for, but never came. I turned toward her. Are you still waiting? No, Renee replied, eyes steady, because I've learned some people can't give what we need. Not because they're cruel, but because they're not capable of understanding. We looked at each other. No drama, no pity. Just two people, trying to preserve what's still whole after so much has been lost. And I thought to myself, maybe the only thing worth holding on to is this moment, and the person honestly sitting beside me. No, deepen the sense of safety and mutual acceptance. Not trying to fix each other, just existing as they are. I used to think I was broken, Renee said, her voice low like a confession. Not because of the past, but because I couldn't trust anymore, couldn't open up, couldn't love without fear. I listened, didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix her words. I tried loving a few people after, she continued, but each time I felt like a burden, like a problem they were trying to solve. I exhaled gently. I used to be that person, always trying to make someone feel less damaged, without realizing I was making them feel not enough. Renee turned to me. So, what do you see when you look at me? I didn't hesitate. I think you don't have to be healed to deserve love. And for the first time, she didn't argue. She just looked at me for a long moment, as if slowly starting to believe it. Note: explore the forming relationship in a mature way, built on presence, not expectation, opening the feeling of maybe stay longer. Do you plan to see me again after tonight? Renee asked, not with doubt, but wanting clarity. I didn't answer immediately, not out of hesitation, but because I knew people who've been hurt don't need hollow promises. I didn't come here looking for someone, I said, but if there's a reason I want to stay, it's because I don't have to try so hard when I'm with you. She smiled. Not forced, but real. Sounds like a good enough reason. I nodded. I'm not promising anything long term, but I want to have one more drink with you after this. And maybe another next week. Renee looked at me, and this time her eyes softened truly. Then let's start with one drink after the party, Malik. No commitments needed, just someone real, someone close. Note: shift to a more private space, from a crowded party to an intimate world of two, deepening the quiet bond. Inside, the music changed again. The wedding continued. Hugs, well wishes, flashes of cameras catching staged memories. No one noticed us anymore. No one knew. The most meaningful moment of the night wasn't part of the ceremony, but in a garden corner, where two people no longer wore masks. Renee looked up at the night sky. People think today belongs to Claire, but to me it's the day I reclaim myself. I looked at her. And you don't need anyone to validate that. Just someone quiet enough to understand, she replied. And I saw you there. I smiled. No one cheered for us. There were no fireworks, no spotlight, just the peace of a night, where we no longer had to prove anything to the world. Note: conclude the emotional tension arc with a deep truth. You don't need a grand victory to win, just to still be standing. I used to think, Renee said, that if Claire ever had to bow her head to me, I'd win. I imagined her apologizing, crying, explaining. She exhaled slowly. But then I realized I don't need her to fall. I just need not to fall every time I think of her. I nodded. Victory isn't making someone else lose. Right, she said. It's still standing after everything, and not becoming what you once hated. We sat in silence, but not the awkward kind. Just the quiet of two people who knew they'd just walked a full circle through the past. Claire was still inside at her own wedding, but Renee was no longer caught in that orbit, standing tall, light in her step, and free. Note: concludes the emotional peak of confrontation arc. Renee choosing to walk away from the old space, opening space for transformation. Renee stood before me, not suddenly, not hurried, as if she had just finished a final meeting with her old self. I want to leave, she said. The party? I asked. No, the role of the victim. She looked back at the ballroom one more time. Not for Claire, not for anyone's gaze. No one needs to see me win or confront her. My presence here is enough. I nodded. Then let's go. She didn't ask where to, because maybe the destination doesn't matter as much as who walks beside you. As we stepped out of the wedding lights, I glanced back. Claire was laughing with someone, but her eyes flicked quickly toward the door, and I knew she saw. Renee said nothing. She had left the past behind, without looking back. Note: opens the plot twist. Flips the main character's and viewer's perception, revealing how long-buried truth still shapes the present. We left the wedding without farewells, without lingering glances, just the night ahead and the sound of shoes tapping softly on the stone sidewalk. You know, Renee said after a quiet stretch, some truths don't need to be shouted in a crowd. I turned to her. If it's known by the right person at the right time, it finds its place. I knew she meant me. Do you think Claire will change? She asked, that I listen calm and steady. I sighed. Maybe not, but she'll remember today for the rest of her life. Renee smiled, not smug. That's enough. Our steps slowed, because once truth is acknowledged, there's no need to run from anything. Note: extends the twist, shifts to Claire's perspective, showing how Renee's quiet presence begins to fracture her illusion of control. Inside, Claire still held her proper smile. The flashbulbs kept popping, the compliments kept flowing, but her heart was no longer steady. Gregory approached with a drink. You okay? Everything's fine. Too quick, but he didn't press. Claire glanced toward the door where she'd last seen Malik and Renee walk out. No one else noticed that moment, but she couldn't forget Renee's eyes. Not hateful, not accusatory, just a look that made her feel seen through. And that was the scariest part. No one shouted, no one exposed her, just the truth, standing still and knocking from the inside. Note dives into Claire's inner turmoil. The twist doesn't erupt, it quietly collapses the one who thought she'd escaped. Claire stood before the mirror in the dressing room alone. The party noise behind the door sounded distant, as if it were for someone else entirely. She adjusted her hair, but her hand trembled. She reapplied lipstick for the third time, but her lips still looked pale. She stared into her own reflection. The woman everyone in the hall admired. Successful, happy, flawless. But the eyes in the mirror said something else. No longer confident, no longer certain. Because for the first time in years, Claire remembered the name she tried to forget. Alana Thomas. And what made it hard to breathe wasn't being exposed. It was the realization that deep down she'd never apologized. Not to Alana, not to herself. And the cruelest lie of all was the one she'd told herself. I didn't do anything wrong. Note, continues Claire's unraveling. The twist peaks not in exposure, but in haunting truths known only to the self. Claire sat down, hands resting on her lap, unmoving. The expensive wedding dress clung like armor, beautiful, flawless, numb. Suddenly a knock on the door. "We're about to take pictures with your parents, love," Gregory called softly from outside. "I'm coming," Claire answered, voice steady. But she didn't stand. Instead, her eyes drifted to the mirror's edge, where for a second she thought she saw Alana. Not real, just a reflection from memory. A girl with wounded eyes who she once turned away from. No one else saw it, because no one else had carried it for over a decade. Claire touched her chest. No blood, no wound, just a hollow face, and it had just echoed with the knock of memory. Note, concludes Claire's inner twist with a visual contrast. External perfection versus internal collapse. The true cost of denying the past. Claire stepped out of the room. She stood in the ballroom as if she'd never cracked. Her cheeks still rosy, her dress flawless, her smile picture perfect. She toasted a distant cousin, hugged a best friend flown in from Florida, posed with her mother beneath the fairy tale backdrop. Everything was perfect. Except her. Inside, Claire felt herself walking between two worlds. One full of lights, blessings, celebration, and another, silent, cold, dim as a dim, where the memory of Alana sat, watching, saying nothing, just watching. No one saw, no one knew, but Claire did. And now she understood. The most frightening thing wasn't the past being exposed. It was realizing it had never truly left. Note, returns to Renee and Malik. Closes the twist arc with contrast. Claire remains in the facade. They move forward with truth and freedom. The night had deepened. We walked slowly down the stone path, our footsteps quieter than any words. Renee stayed silent, but I could tell the weight was gone. Her posture no longer guarded, her shoulders no longer tight. "I thought I'd feel something after walking away," she said. She said. Anger, relief, something clear. "And?" I asked. "I just feel enough." She paused, looked up at the sky. Enough to not carry it anymore. Enough to stop checking if the old wounds are still there. I stood beside her. "Claire stays with everything she's built." "And you?" Renee looked at me and smiled. "I don't need to build anything. I just need to keep going." And I knew she hadn't been left behind. She had finally walked free of what once held her. Note, continues the post-twist healing arc. Now Renee begins to open her heart, no longer defensive, ready for something new. "You know," Renee spoke again after a stretch of quiet, "tonight I didn't come to find anyone. Not even myself." I looked at her, listening like each word unlocked something. "But then I met you," she said, soft as a breeze. "Wrong timing, wrong place, maybe the right person." I didn't answer with words, just gently squeezed her hand in mine. She didn't pull away. She let it stay longer, like she wanted to remember what it felt like, something unplanned but worth trusting. "I'm not ready for anything big," she said, "but I'm ready to walk a bit further with someone who doesn't try to fix me, just walks beside me." I nodded. "And if you fall out a step?" she asked. I smiled. "Then I'll slow down." Note. Transitions Malik Renee's relationship into something clear, not a long promise, just an honest start. We stopped outside a small cafe still glowing at the corner. No one said, let's go in," No one asked, "Are you hungry?" But we both stood at the door, then laughed at the same time. "It's late," I said. "Yeah," Renee replied, "but I think I can stay up one more hour if someone sits with me." I opened the door for her, not to impress, just because it felt right. We chose a table by the window, soft amber lights, coffee in the air, the clink of a spoon on ceramic, everything in balance. Not too quiet, not too loud. Like us, not rushing into something grand, just starting with a nod. And sometimes that's how something real begins. No fireworks, just someone who stays, when they could have walked away. Note, deepens emotional connection. Both characters reveal unseen parts of themselves, fragments long hidden. The steam curled above Renee's tea. She turned the cup slowly, as if weighing whether to speak. "There are parts of me," she began, "I've hidden for so long. Even I forgot they existed." I didn't ask, just waited. "I used to write music, but she said softly. "For a while, it was the only way I could express what I felt, when no one was listening. And now? Now I listen to the old songs, and see someone I used to be. Not scared, not angry, just tender." I nodded gently. "I've never told anyone, but I once thought about quitting my field. I didn't think I was making a difference." Renee looked at me. "So why did you stay?" I smiled, because tonight someone showed me that what feels lost can still be found. No, concludes the twist arc, transitions smoothly into healing and recovery, closing the old story fully. By the time we left the cafe, it was late. The streets were empty, washed in yellow lamplight and streaks of mist. We walked side by side, not holding hands, not rushing, but no longer keeping distance. "Do you feel lighter?" Renee asked, eyes forward. I paused, then nodded. "I do, but not because of Claire." "Then who?" she asked. "Since we walked out of that party." I stopped looking back. I started really seeing the person walking next to me. Renee smiled softly, no longer avoiding the moment. "Me too." A breeze passed by, not heavy, not cold, and in that instant I knew the past had closed, not with an apology, but with someone brave enough to let it go, and someone else willing to walk with them. 1 week after the wedding, I received the first message from Renee. "I just listened to an old song I once wrote. It doesn't hurt anymore." I didn't reply right away. I opened the attached track and quietly listened until the very end. The melody wasn't sad. There was a hint of ache, but no despair, like a healed scar, not erased, just no longer throbbing. I texted back, "I just walked past the cafe from that night. The window seat is still open." She replied quicker than I expected. "Then sit down. I'll be there soon." We didn't have to say anything about Claire. No one brought up the past, because sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, without wanting to return. She really came, 13 minutes after the message. No makeup, no fancy dress, just a light jacket, her hair tied back, and eyes that no longer guarded themselves. We ordered the same drinks as last time, sat at the same window seat. "This time no drama," she smiled. "That's okay," I said. "I'm here for the coffee. And for you, if you still want that." She didn't answer, just quietly slid the teacup toward me. A small gesture, but it meant everything. I still do. We sat there for over an hour. No talk of love, no plans for the future, just books, the breeze, her old piano, and I realized sometimes the truest things don't need names. They grow through kindness, through presence. Renee leaned back, eyes on the street. "Do you think, if not for that wedding, we would have never met?" I nodded. "Maybe, but I don't think that's why we stayed." She turned to me, waiting. "Because if it was just about Claire," I continued, "I would have left that cafe the moment you stood up." "Then what is it?" she asked. I paused, then said slowly, "Because I like the way you're quiet, without making me feel alone." Renee smiled. "Me too. I stayed, not because I lacked someone, but because for once I felt enough. In a world full of people trying to fill their gaps, we chose each other, not from emptiness, but from wholeness." One crisp fall morning with soft sun and cool breeze, Renee and I walked through a nearby park. No plan, no destination, just a walk, like hundreds of couples. But to me, it meant more. "When you asked me to the wedding, did you ever imagine it would end like this?" she asked, half teasing. I laughed. I didn't even think I'd stay more than an hour. And now, she said, trailing off. I nodded. Now, every step with you doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a beginning. Renee looked at me, eyes calm and deep. And I've realized what matters most isn't how something starts. It's who stays, when it feels like the end. We sat on a park bench, the quiet morning making the whole city feel like it was breathing slower. No one took photos, no one asked, "What are you two?" Just my hand resting gently on hers, and her hand didn't pull away. I used to think happiness meant being acknowledged, Renee said softly. A compliment, a shared photo, a relationship with a name. And now, I asked. She smiled, still watching the leaves. Now, I think happiness is sitting here without pretending, without explaining, and still being seen kindly. I squeezed her hand, gently, wordlessly, because some things, the less we try to prove, the more real they become. And some people, the quieter they stay, the harder they are to leave. That afternoon we sat in my small kitchen. Tea simmered on the stove, a quiet jazz tune hummed from the speaker. Renee told me about the father she lost young. She spoke evenly, like someone used to hiding emotion behind the facts. I didn't say I understand, didn't ask, "Why haven't you told anyone?" I just listened, stirring the tea like it was any ordinary moment. But I knew to her it wasn't. Some things don't need fixing, she said after a while. I just need someone who doesn't turn away when I share them. I looked up, met her eyes. I'm here. No more. No promises. No fixes. And I saw it. She believed me, without needing another word. One morning I got an email from an unknown address. No subject, no greeting, just an attachment, a photo of a handwritten letter. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Claire's. No apology, no long explanations, just a short note. Dear Malik, maybe you don't need to hear this, but if one day Alana wants to know, tell her I remember. No signature. No date. I didn't send it to Renee. Not to hide it, but because I knew she didn't need it to move on. We'd already moved forward. And maybe, just maybe, Claire was learning to take her first steps too. Not because anyone made her, but because for the first time she wanted to. That morning it rained lightly. We didn't go out, didn't do anything special. Renee sat by the window reading. I made coffee, the soft hum of the machine like the house breathing. No big words, no schedules, no social posts or shared updates. We just were. When I placed her cup on the table, she looked up. Feels like we've lived here forever. I chuckled. Or maybe we just started, but it's the right place. She didn't reply, just reached for my hand, warm and steady. No anniversaries, no special soundtrack, but maybe, just maybe, these are the days that make someone stay the longest. That night, on the balcony, watching city lights flicker, Renee rested her head on my shoulder and asked, "Do you ever think, if I hadn't been hurt, would we still have met?" I paused, then gently shook my head. Maybe not, but I don't want you to be anyone else, or to have lived anything different. Why not? Because the you sitting here learned how to stand back up, how to forgive, how to love without hiding. She was quiet, then slowly said, "And I wouldn't want you to have never been hurt." I turned to her, surprised, because if you hadn't been, maybe you wouldn't be gentle enough to understand me now. We didn't promise forever, but for the first time we chose each other, knowing exactly who we were. Some relationships end in tears, some in silence, and some open a new journey. I went to an ex's wedding seeking closure. But what I found was a beginning. Not flashy, not perfectly timed. Just one person, one step, one quiet nod saying, "I don't need saving, just to be seen." And that was enough. Renee and I don't need a theme song, because every day we walk together is a new melody. If you've ever carried a wound, believe this, it didn't weaken you. It made you more real. And maybe, just maybe, when you least expect it, someone will see you for who you truly are. If this story touched you, share it, because maybe, just maybe, it's the beginning of something for someone else too.